I am not sure which was colder, the sneer on my daughter-in-law's face or the look in my son's eyes as he signed the paper like he was saving me. A single comment about a bill turned my kitchen into a battlefield. Then I realized they did not just want my money. They wanted my identity. My name is Marlene Hart. I have lived in Riverside Glen, Pennsylvania, for 30 years. I am 58 years old, and I do not rattle easily. I work at the Northbridge Civic Benefits Office. My job involves sitting across from people who are often having the worst days of their lives, listening to them explain why they need help. Over the decades, I have developed a distinct ear for the difference between a desperate plea and a calculated lie. I know what a scam looks like before the paperwork is even signed. My son, Evan, is 33. His wife, Kendra, is 31. They have a routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, they pull into my driveway at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening. They do not come to ask how my day was, or if I need help with the gutters. They come because that is when the roast comes out of the oven. Tonight was no different. Kendra walked in with a handbag that likely cost $2,000 tucked under her arm. She set it on one of my kitchen chairs, careful not to let the leather touch the wood. She never brings anything else. No dessert, no side dish, not even a simple bunch of kale. She brings her appetite and her judgment, and she expects both to be fed. I had the electric bill and the water bill sitting on the corner of the table. I usually sort them before dinner to keep my mind organized. I moved to sweep them into a drawer to clear space for the plates. But Kendra's hand shot out. She picked up the top envelope. It was an overdue notice for a mere $40 that I had simply forgotten to mail because I had worked a double shift earlier in the week. She looked at the red stamp on the envelope. Then she looked at me. She laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound, like glass breaking under a boot. "If you're so smart, pay your own bills," she sneered. The room went quiet. The air felt suddenly thin. I looked at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for the apology. Then I looked at my son. Evan did not tell her to be respectful. He did not look embarrassed. He just shrugged, slicing into the pot roast I had paid for and cooked. "She has a point." "Mom," Evan said, chewing as he spoke. "You're getting older. Maybe it is getting to be too much for you to handle alone. We were talking on the way over. It might be better if we just merged everything. Your pension, your salary. We can put it into a joint account with ours. We will manage it for you. You won't have to worry about missing payments." He said it with a casual confidence, as if he were suggesting a new brand of coffee rather than the surrender of my financial independence. I looked at the two of them. Kendra was smirking, tapping her manicured nails on the table. Evan was avoiding my eyes, focused entirely on his potatoes. They thought I was a confused old woman. They thought I was drowning. I was not drowning. I was hunting. I kept my face perfectly still. I did not let my hands shake. I forced a small, tired smile. "Okay," I said softly. Evan looked up, surprised. "Really, yes," I said. "If you think it is best." They exchanged a look. It was a look of victory. They finished their dinner quickly after that, eager to leave and celebrate their new acquisition. They kissed my cheek, grabbed the expensive handbag, and drove away into the night. I washed the dishes. I dried them and put them away. The house was silent. Then I walked to the dining table. I took out a notebook from my purse. I sat down and picked up my pen. I did not write a diary entry about my hurt feelings. I wrote a report. October 12th, 6:45 in the evening. Kendra Hart stated, "If you are so smart, pay your own bills." Evan Hart proposed full financial control. Reasons cited age-related incompetence. I noted their tone. I noted the specific bills they had looked at. I noted that Evan did not offer to pay the bill with his own money, only to control the money used to pay it. I closed the notebook. I walked to the hallway bureau and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside, beneath a stack of old linens, was a heavy metal box. I opened it. Inside lay a folder of yellowed documents and a single, brand new, empty USB drive. I had prepared for this day, hoping it would never come. But hope is not a strategy. I did not always sit behind a desk at the Civic Benefits Office. For 15 years, I was a night nurse. I scrubbed bedpans and held the hands of dying strangers while Evan slept in a neighbour's spare room. When his father left, he left us with nothing but a rusted sedan and a stack of unpaid heating bills. I clawed our way out of that hole, one double shift at a time. I traded my sleep for his stability. I remember the day I sold my grandmother's diamond ring. It was not a huge stone, but it was the only thing of value I owned. I sold it to pay for Evan's first semester of HVAC certification classes. He tells people now that he is a self-made man. He tells them he built his life from the ground up with his own grit. He never asks where that $3,000 came from. And I never told him. Maybe that silence was my mistake. It taught him that my sacrifices were invisible, just natural resources for him to mine. I felt that most acutely at his wedding. It was held at Stonewell Manor, a place with crystal chandeliers and waiters in white gloves. They sat me at table 22, next to the swinging kitchen doors. When Kendra introduced me to her wealthy friends, she did not say, "This is the woman who raised my husband." She smiled that tight, rehearsed smile, and said, "This is Evan's mother. She lives very simply." After the wedding, the criticism started. First, it was my curtains, then my clothes. "Oh, Marlene," she would say, her voice dripping with fake concern. "That polyester makes you look so tired. And this furniture? It smells like a thrift store." I changed the curtains. I bought the cotton blouses she approved of. I did it because I was terrified. I was terrified that if I did not fit into the picture they were painting, they would simply crop me out. I wanted to see my son, so I let them edit me. But looking back now, sitting in the silence of my kitchen, I realized their interest had a different flavor. It was not just about my curtains. It was about access. Evan had started knowing things he should not know. Last month, he mentioned my electric bill cycle ended on the 15th. He knew the exact balance of my savings account down to the cent. "You should move that $4,000 into a certificate of deposit." "Mom," he had said casually while watching football. At the time, I thought he was just being protective. Now, my mind replayed the smaller moments, the times he visited and his phone died, so he needed to borrow mine to order takeout. He would take it into the other room for 20 minutes. The time he borrowed my car keys and my wallet to check the tire pressure and was gone for an hour. He always spoke so fast during those moments, blurring the details with charm. I had been blind. Or rather, I had squeezed my eyes shut. Doris Wynne, my neighbour across the hall, had tried to warn me. She stopped me by the mailboxes 6 months ago. "Marlene," she had whispered, looking over her shoulder to make sure the hall was empty. "I hear them. When you go into the kitchen to make tea, I hear them in your living room. They argue about her money. They talk about how long it will take. I had brushed her off. I told myself Doris was just a lonely old woman who watched too many crime dramas. I told myself my son loved me. I was the fool. I picked up the framed photograph on the mantel. It was Evan, at 7 years old, missing a front tooth, holding a plastic trophy I had bought him just for trying. I looked at that innocent face and waited for the tears to come. They did not come. The part of me that was a mother wanted to weep for the boy who used to hold my hand. But the part of me that was a survivor, the woman who worked double shifts and fought off poverty, was done weeping. I traced the glass over his face with a cold finger. You chose the role. Evan, I whispered to the empty room. You chose the villain. So now it is my turn to choose the stage. The next morning, I walked into the Westfield Community Bank on Main Street. The teller smiled at me. A young woman who knew me only as the lady who deposited checks on Fridays. I did not smile back. I asked for the full transaction history of my checking and savings accounts for the last 12 months. I took the stack of papers to a quiet booth in the corner. I ran my finger down the columns, ignoring the small grocery purchases and the utility payments I recognized. Then I stopped. My finger rested on a withdrawal from a branch in Northbridge, a part of town I never visited. It was for $1,920. The date was a Tuesday in July. I checked my work calendar on my phone. I had been at my desk at the Civic Benefits office from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon that day. I could not have made that withdrawal. I requested to see the withdrawal slip. The manager brought a copy to the booth. The signature at the bottom was a shaky, looped scrawl that attempted to mimic my name. It was not my handwriting. It was the handwriting of a boy who had practiced signing his mother's name on report cards in middle school. It was Evan's hand. The security camera, still from that timestamp, showed a figure in a hooded sweatshirt, face obscured, but the posture was unmistakable. It was the slump of a man who thought he was smarter than the camera. I went home and logged into a credit monitoring site. The screen loaded, and my stomach turned over. There was a credit card account I did not recognize. It had been opened 14 months ago. I clicked on the details. The billing address for the card was not my house in Riverside Glen. It was the address of Evan and Kendra's apartment. I scrolled through the statements. The dates aligned perfectly with Kendra's sudden interest in interior design. There was a charge for a marble dining table, a crystal chandelier, 3 leather armchairs. I remembered visiting their apartment last year. Kendra had run her hand over the new table, beaming. I just have a knack for finding high-end pieces on a budget, she had said. You really have to know where to look. Marlene. She had bought her dream home with my identity. I did not call them. I did not scream. I sat at my kitchen table and began to map out the security holes in my life. I listed everyone who had access to my social security number. I listed everyone who knew where I kept my spare keys. I thought about the times Evan had borrowed my phone to make a call, likely intercepting 2-factor authentication codes and then deleting the messages. Then I found the utility contract. It was a service agreement for electricity and gas at 104 Larkspur Cove. That was the address of the new house Evan had just purchased. He had told me he secured a great mortgage rate through his own hard work. But looking at this paper, I realized the lights in his new house were burning on my credit. I needed a witness. I walked across the hall and knocked on Doris Wynn's door. She opened it, looking frail but sharp-eyed. Doris, I said, keeping my voice steady. I need to know. You said you saw them arguing. Did you see anything else? Doris hesitated, pulling her cardigan tighter. I saw him at your mailbox. Marlene. 3 times last month. He came when you were at work. He had a key to the box. I thought you asked him to pick up your mail. I did not. I said, would you be willing to say that to a lawyer? Doris looked at my face, saw the steel in my eyes, and nodded. Yes, I will say it. That boy has no shame. When I returned to my apartment, there was a letter on the floor. It was from a payday loan company I had never heard of. The bold red letters on the front said, overdue. My hands did not shake. The fear that had gripped me in the bank was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. They had not just stolen my money, they had stolen my good name to build their facade of success. I opened my notebook. On a fresh page, I wrote a new title in black ink. The Heart File Kendra and Evan. I was not their mother anymore. I was the investigator, and they were the suspects. The air in the kitchen was stagnant, heavy with the scent of the meatloaf I had prepared and the unspoken tension radiating from the manila folder Evan had placed on the table. It sat between the salt shaker and the pepper mill like a loaded weapon. They had arrived with a practiced script, their voices pitched to that condescending frequency people use when speaking to children or the very old. It is just a standard power of attorney. Mom, Evan said, pushing the paper toward me with a fingertip. It allows us to handle the messy stuff. You have worked hard your whole life. You should not have to squint at fine print anymore. Kendra leaned forward, her elbows resting on the table. She wore a look of performative concern that did not quite reach her eyes. Everyone does this for their aging parents. Marlene, she said, her voice smooth and syrupy. It is the responsible thing to do. Just sign it. It will make everything so much more convenient. I looked at the paper. I saw the legal jargon that would strip me of my autonomy. I rubbed my temples, feigning a sudden wave of exhaustion. I am feeling a bit faint. I lied, letting my shoulders slump. Let us eat first. I need to get my blood sugar up before I look at legal documents. We can do this after dessert. I watched their faces fall. They exchanged a quick, irritated glance. They wanted this done quickly. They wanted the keys to the castle before the main course. But they could not force me. Not yet. We ate in silence. The clink of silverware against china sounded like swords clashing. When the plates were cleared, Kendra immediately tapped the folder again. Okay, dinner is over, she said. The syrup gone from her voice. Sign the papers. Marlene, stop dragging this out. I just want to understand, I said slowly. If I sign this, you handle everything, Evan promised, nodding eagerly. So, I paused, looking directly at Kendra. If you are so smart, pay your own bills, I quoted her own words back to her, but I made it sound like a confused mumble, as if I were senile and repeating things I had heard. Kendra's eyes narrowed. She let out a short, sharp laugh. Exactly. If you are smart, you will let us pay them. Since you seem to be struggling. Evan chuckled nervously, a low sound in his throat that signaled his agreement. He was not defending me. He was waiting for the payout. All right, I said, leaning back. If I sign this tonight, which bill will you pay first? Which one is the most urgent? Kendra blinked. She looked at Evan, then back at me. She shrugged with arrogant confidence. The gas bill, obviously, she said. Winter is coming. We would not want you to freeze. I stared at her. My house has been heated by electricity for 20 years. There is no gas line to this property. She did not know. She had never looked at a single bill. She only cared about the bank account numbers at the bottom. I see, I said softly. That is good to know. I stood up and began clearing the table. Also, I wanted to tell you both. I will not be cooking dinner on Fridays anymore. I'm getting too old for all this prep work. You will have to make other arrangements. The silence that followed was absolute. They looked at each other, genuine panic rising in their expressions. It was not concern for my health. It was the shock of a parasite realizing the host was detaching itself. But Evan stammered, his face flushing red. Where will we eat? He did not ask what I would eat. He did not ask if I had enough food. He only cared about his free meal. Kendra slammed her hand on the table. The mask of the caring daughter-in-law shattered completely. You are being incredibly selfish. Marlene, she snapped. We drive all the way out here to help you, to organize your life, and you decide to cut us off. You are just being stubborn. You are losing your grip on reality. You are confused. Maybe I am, I said calmly. I picked up the manila folder. I did not sign it. I walked over to the bureau in the hallway. I opened the drawer where I kept my locked metal box. I placed the unsigned papers inside the drawer. Marlene, what are you doing? Kendra demanded, standing up. I looked at them. I offered a polite, vague smile. I am going to keep these safe, I said. I will read them when I am feeling less confused, but not tonight. Tonight? I think you should go. I turned the key in the lock. The click of the metal bolt sliding home echoed through the room. It was not loud, but it was final. I put the key in my pocket and faced them. I did not raise my voice. I did not tremble. I simply waited for them to leave my house. Graham Pike's office on Dunbar Street was small, smelling faintly of lemon polish and old law books. He was a man who did not waste words. He spread the documents I had gathered across his mahogany desk, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he scrutinized the bank statements and the credit report. This is not a misunderstanding, Mrs. Hart, Graham said, looking up at me with grave eyes. This is systematic financial abuse. And given the unauthorized credit lines, we are looking at identity theft. If you were my mother, I would tell you to scorch the earth. I do not want to burn it down yet. I said, my voice steady. I want to trap them inside first. I left his office and went to work. Not my job, but the work of erasing myself from their reach. I went to a bank across town, a competitor to Westfield, and opened a new account. I transferred every cent of my savings, leaving the old account with exactly $5 in it. I sat in the bank lobby and called the credit bureaus one by one. I placed a freeze on my social security number. No one would be opening a loan, a credit card, or buying a stick of gum in my name without a personal identification number that only I knew. I requested the security footage from Westfield Community Bank, formerly through Graham's office. I demanded transaction logs showing the device identification numbers and IP addresses for every online transfer. I wanted proof that the money was moved by a phone located in Evan's pocket, not my living room. That evening, I had a locksmith come to the house while I knew Evan and Kendra were at a dinner party. He replaced the deadbolts on the front and back doors. I installed a video doorbell, a small, unblinking eye that would record anyone who approached my sanctuary. I went to the post office and had the lock on my mailbox changed. I did not tell Evan. I did not send a text. I simply cut the lines. Before I went inside, I stopped at Doris Wynn's apartment. I handed her a thick, sealed manila envelope. Doris, I said, holding her hand. If they try to say I am losing my mind, if they try to tell people I am incompetent, you give this to the police. It has dates. It has copies of the forged checks. It proves I am the sane one. Doris tucked the envelope into her housecoat pocket. They won't get away with it. Marlene, not while I am breathing. The next day, I made the calls to the utility companies servicing 104 Larkspur Cove. I informed them that the accounts were opened fraudulently. I filed affidavits of identity theft for each one, keeping every confirmation number and receipt in my new file. But the real shock came when I arrived at my own workplace. I decided to review the recent intake files at the Northbridge Civic Benefits Office, just to be thorough. I searched my own name in the system. A file popped up. It was an application for emergency heating assistance, submitted 3 weeks ago. It was in my name. It claimed I had 0 assets and was at risk of freezing. At the bottom was a digital copy of my signature, a clumsy scan lifted from some other document. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. It was not just greed. Kendra did not just want the money. She was building a paper trail. She wanted a government record stating that Marlene Hart was destitute, unable to pay for heat, and in need of intervention. They were manufacturing a crisis to justify a conservatorship. They wanted to take my rights because they claimed I could not take care of myself. I printed the fraudulent application. I walked straight to the office of the district manager. "Mrs. Hart," he asked, looking up from his coffee. "Is everything all right? I need to request a formal performance review," I said, standing tall. "And I need a certified letter from this agency confirming my employment status, my salary, and my mental competency to perform my duties. I need it dated today." He looked confused, but he nodded. "Of course. But why the urgency?" "Because," I said, clutching the fraudulent paper in my hand, "I am about to prove that I am very much in control." The notification appeared on my phone during my lunch break. It was a long post from Evan. He did not use my name, but he painted a portrait so vivid that anyone in Riverside Glen would recognize the subject. He wrote about the heartbreak of watching a parent decline and the toxicity that comes when they refuse necessary care. He framed himself as the martyr, the dutiful son trying to save a drowning woman who fought his helping hand. Beneath his words, Kendra had commented, "You are a saint for keeping it together, babe. We just have to pray she eventually accepts the love we are offering." I watched the comments accumulate. His friends, boys I had made peanut butter sandwiches for 20 years ago, offered their sympathies. They called me difficult. They called me a burden. I did not type a furious defense. I did not call him to scream. I simply pressed 2 buttons on the side of my phone. Click. Screenshot. I saved the image and logged the timestamp. This was not just a public humiliation. It was evidence of their motive. They were seeding the ground, preparing the community to accept it when they eventually tried to have me declared incompetent. A few minutes later, a message request appeared in my inbox from a user with no profile picture. It was a woman who worked with Kendra. I should not get involved. The message read, "But I cannot watch this." Kendra brags in the break room. She told us she found a loophole to take control of senior assets without getting sued. She calls it early inheritance. Watch your back, Marlene. My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to finish my sandwich. When I returned to my desk, I logged onto a local community buy and sell page. I had a hunch. I typed vintage furniture into the search bar. There it was. Solid oak rocking chair. Great condition. Cash only. It was my chair. The one sitting in my living room. The photograph in the listing had been taken recently. I could see the corner of my new hallway rug in the background. Someone had been inside my house while I was at work to catalogue my possessions for sale. I opened the app for my new video doorbell. I scrolled back through the footage from the previous day. At 11 in the morning, Evan walked up to my porch. He looked casual, whistling a tune. He slid his key into the lock. He tried to turn it. It did not move. He tried again, jamming it harder. Then he shoved his shoulder against the wood. The new deadbolt held firm. He stepped back, his face twisting from casual confidence to ugly rage. He pulled out his phone and made a furious call, pacing the length of my porch. He had come to rob me, and a piece of metal I bought for $50 had stopped him. That evening, the real Evan stood on my porch. He knocked this time. When I opened the door, he was wearing his concerned son mask. His voice was soft, whipped into a confection of worry. "Mum, my key didn't work today. I stopped by to check on the furnace. Did you change the locks? Are you mad at me?" His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Kendra stood behind him, her eyes darting past my shoulder, trying to see if the rocking chair was still there. I looked him dead in the eye. I did not blink. "I am not mad," I said, my voice level and cool. "I am just learning to be safe." Kendra flinched, the color drained from her face. She understood exactly what I meant. I was not locking out burglars. I was locking out my family. The next morning, the mail arrived. There was a heavy envelope addressed to me. Inside was a letter on thick paper with a gold letterhead. It was titled Notice of Mediation. It claimed to be from a law firm representing Evan Hart, demanding a meeting to discuss amicable asset management to avoid further legal action. I looked at the name of the firm, the Justice Group of West Pennsylvania. I walked to my computer and searched for the firm. It did not exist. The address listed at the bottom was a rented mailbox in a strip mall next to a laundromat. It was a fake, a clumsy, desperate bluff. They were trying to scare me into submission with a letterhead they probably printed at home. I folded the letter and added it to the file. They thought they were tightening the noose around me, but they had just handed me the rope. I agreed to meet them at Maple and Grain, a coffee shop on 4th Avenue that is always crowded with hipsters and young mothers. I chose it for the noise and the witnesses. I wanted to be sure that if Evan raised his voice, 50 people would turn their heads. They arrived 10 minutes late. Evan walked in first, followed by Kendra, and trailing behind them was a man I did not know. He wore a tweed jacket and carried a leather satchel, looking like a casting director's idea of a kindly physician. "Mom," Evan said, pulling out a chair. "This is Dr. Eris. He is an old friend of mine," I thought. "Well, I thought he could just chat with you, informally, about your memory lapses." The man smiled, a practiced, condescending tilt of the lips. He began to speak, his voice low and soothing. "Marlene, Evan tells me you have been forgetting things, becoming paranoid. It is quite common at your age to feel—" I cut him off. I placed my hands flat on the table and looked him in the eye. "What is your medical license number?" I asked sharply. "And in which state are you board certified to diagnose cognitive decline in a patient you have known for 30 seconds? The man blinked. He looked at Evan, then back at me. He cleared his throat, but no numbers came out. He muttered something about a lunch appointment he had forgotten, grabbed his satchel, and walked out the door before the waitress could even bring him water. Evan looked furious. His ears were turning that deep shade of red that used to signal a tantrum when he was a toddler. Kendra, however, did not flush. She simply reached into her oversized bag and slapped a document onto the table. "Forget the doctor," she hissed. "Just sign the papers." "Marlene, this is the power of attorney. We already filled it out to save you the trouble. We just need your signature at the bottom to match the one on file." I looked at the document. The signature block was already filled in with a digital copy of my handwriting. It was the exact same pixelated scan used on the fraudulent heating assistance application. "I see," I said. I reached into my tote bag. I did not pull out a pen. I pulled out my own envelope. It was thick, heavy with the weight of truth. I slid it across the table, knocking their papers aside. "What is this?" Evan asked, his voice tight. "Open it," I said. He pulled out the first sheet. It was the transaction log from Westfield Community Bank, showing the withdrawal in Northbridge, then the credit report showing the card sent to his address, then the utility contract for 104 Larkspur Cove. Finally, the screenshot of his Facebook post mocking me. Evan stared at the papers. His hands began to tremble. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "Mom, I can explain." "No," I said. "You cannot. You are making a mistake," Evan said, his voice rising, drawing glances from the nearby tables. "If you do this, if you go down this road, you will have no one. We are your only family. You will die alone in that apartment." The words were meant to crush me. They were meant to target the deepest fear of every aging parent. But as I looked at him, a man who would sell my dignity for a marble table, I felt nothing but relief. "I would rather be alone," I said, "than have someone treat me like an ATM." Kendra slammed her hand on the table, rattling the sugar jar. "You ungrateful old witch," she spat. "We were trying to build a future that credit card. I only chose the one with the high travel rewards because I thought we could take you on a trip someday. I specifically selected the paperless billing so you would not be stressed by the mail." The table went silent. I smiled. It was a cold, small smile. "Thank you, Kendra," I said softly. "You just admitted you opened the account and selected the billing preferences. I hope you remember that detail when the deposition comes." Kendra's mouth fell open. She realized too late that she had just confessed to a federal crime in the middle of a coffee shop. I stood up. "From this moment on, you do not speak to me," I said. "You speak to my lawyer, Graham Pike. And just so you know, I have already notified the fraud department at the bank. They are very interested in the camera footage of a man in a hooded sweatshirt." Evan stood up so fast his knee hit the table. His coffee cup tipped over, sending a dark, hot wave of liquid across the power of attorney form. The brown stain spread over the papers, soaking into the lies they had written. "Mom, wait, you can't," he stammered, reaching out. I walked away. I did not look back. When I arrived at my front door, my heart was pounding, but my head was clear. Then I looked down. Sitting on my welcome mat was a small gift box wrapped in silver paper. There was a tag that said "I am sorry." I opened it inside the hallway. It was my old smartphone, the one I had replaced months ago. I had thought it was lost in the house. I pressed the power button. It turned on immediately. It was unlocked. They had not lost it. They had taken it. They had unlocked it to bypass my two-factor authentication and, likely, to track my location. They had been watching me the whole time. I dropped the phone into the trash can. The war was not over. It was just moving to the courtroom. Graham Pike ran a calculator tape that seemed to stretch across his desk, like a finish line I never wanted to cross. He tore it off with a sharp rip and placed it in front of me. The number at the bottom was not just a figure, it was years of my life. It was overtime shifts, missed vacations, and the safety net I had woven for my old age. When we factor in the unauthorized credit lines, the personal loans, and the penalties from the damage to your credit score, Graham said, his voice heavy with professional anger, the total comes to just over $40,000. I stared at the number. $40,000. It was enough to break me. But I refused to break. I handed Graham the folder containing the letter from my district manager at the Northbridge Civic Benefits Office. It was a glowing review of my performance, dated yesterday, certifying that I was mentally acute, organized, and fully capable of managing complex caseloads. "File this," I said. "If they try to tell a judge I am senile, this proves I am sharper than they are." Graham nodded, adding it to the growing stack of evidence. We filed the formal fraud complaints that afternoon. We also petitioned the court for a financial restraining order. It was not a physical order of protection, but a legal blockade preventing Evan or Kendra from accessing any account, asset, or credit line associated with my social security number. But the investigation was not done. While reviewing the property records for Evan's house at 104 Larkspur Cove, Graham found something that made the $40,000 look like pocket change. "Marlene," Graham said, turning his monitor toward me. "Did you co-sign for a home equity line of credit on their house?" "No." I said, "I have never even been inside that house." "There is a second mortgage on the property," he said. "It was taken out 6 months ago. The co-borrower is listed as Marlene Hart. The funds were used for home improvements and the purchase of a vehicle." I felt the blood drain from my face. They had leveraged their home against my name. If they defaulted, and they would, given their spending habits, the bank would come for me. They had planned this perfectly. They were going to drain the equity, live like royalty, and when the bill came due, they would simply claim I had agreed to it all. They would let me drown in their debt while they swam away. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was Evan. "Mom. Please. We can work this out. Don't ruin my life over money. I will pay you back. I swear. Just don't make this a legal thing." I did not reply. I let the screen go dark. 10 minutes later, a message arrived from Kendra. The tone was entirely different. "I just found out what Evan did. I am in shock. I had no idea he used your name. He told me he got a bonus at work. Please believe me. I am a victim here too." I almost laughed. It was a masterclass in survival. The ship was sinking, and the rats were already turning on each other. I did not reply to her either. I forwarded both screenshots to Graham's email. My silence was not passive. It was strategic. Every time they texted, and I did not answer, they panicked more. And when people panic, they make mistakes. The final nail in their coffin came from across the hall. Doris Wynne had been busy. She came to my door that evening with a small digital recorder she used for her birdwatching notes. I remembered I had this running on the porch last month when I was trying to record a cardinal. Doris said, "I caught something else instead." She pressed play. The audio was grainy, but Kendra's voice was unmistakable. Don't worry about the payments, babe. The old bat has a pension and perfect credit. Once we get her to sign the power of attorney, it is all free money. She won't even notice until we are done. I looked at Doris. She patted my hand. I told you, Doris said. I protect my flock. I took the recorder to Graham the next morning. He listened to it once. Then he listened to it again. He leaned back in his chair and took off his glasses. Marlene, he said, looking me in the eye, we have more than enough for a civil lawsuit. We can sue them for every dime, plus damages. But with this recording, and the second mortgage, we are crossing a line. What line, I asked. This is criminal fraud, Graham said. Identity theft, forgery, grand larceny. If we take this to the district attorney, your son could go to prison. I looked out the window at the grey Pennsylvania sky. I thought of the little boy I had raised. Then I thought of the man who had stolen my identity to buy a leather chair. Draw up the papers, I said. I am ready. The civil lawsuit hit the county clerk's public database at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. By noon, the whispers in Riverside Glen had turned into a roar. In a small town, a docket number travels faster than bad news. Evan realized that his carefully curated image of the successful, self-made man was cracking under the weight of a fraud allegation. He reacted with the desperate flailing of a drowning man. He posted a long, rambling manifesto on social media. It read like a tragic memoir, filled with vague allusions to his mental health and the cruelty of ungrateful parents. He claimed he was being persecuted for trying to help a confused, elderly woman. But this time, the sympathy likes did not roll in. Instead, the comments section turned into an inquisition. If you were helping her, one neighbor wrote, why is there a lawsuit for identity theft filed against you? My cousin works at the court. Another commented, the filing mentions a second mortgage. Did you really mortgage your mum's house? Kendra was furious. I heard from Doris that Kendra had been uninvited from the Junior League charity brunch. The social currency she valued more than gold was plummeting. She did not stand by her husband. She turned on him. A delivery driver told me he heard screaming coming from their house, with Kendra yelling that she didn't know anything, and that Evan had ruined everything. They were fracturing right down the middle. Then came the message from Michael, a man Evan had known since high school. Michael had always been a bit rough around the edges, but he had a code of honor. He sent me a screenshot of a text conversation from 6 months ago. In the image, Evan had written, "Don't worry about the down payment on the new place. I handled the old lady. She is totally clueless. It is like taking candy from a baby." I stared at the screen. He had not just stolen from me. He had mocked me. My phone rang. It was the fraud investigator from the bank. Mrs. Hart, he said. We have completed the biometric analysis of the ATM footage. The subject's height, gait, and stride length are a 99% match for your son, Evan Hart. We are ready to hand this over to the police if you give the word. I did not have time to answer. My call waiting beeped. It was Evan. I answered. Mom. His voice was small, stripped of all its usual arrogance. Mom, please. We need to talk. I can fix this. You cannot fix a felony. Evan, I said. I have a proposal. He rushed on, sounding breathless. I will pay it back. All of it. The $40,000, I will sell the truck. I will borrow from my 401k. But you have to sign an agreement, a non-disclosure agreement. You have to drop the suit and promise never to tell anyone about this. Not Doris. Not the family. No one. I paused. I understood then what was happening. They were terrified. Not of the debt, but of the truth. Kendra could live with being broke, but she could not live with being known as a thief. They wanted to buy my silence to save their social standing. You want to buy my reputation to save yours, I said. I am your son. Evan cried, his voice cracking. Do you really want to see me in handcuffs? Do you want to destroy my life? I am begging you. I looked around my kitchen. I looked at the table where they had sat and sneered at me. I looked at the bills I had always paid on time. Here is my counteroffer. I said coldly. You will pay back every cent. You will pay my legal fees. You will repair my credit score. And there will be no non-disclosure agreement. In fact, there will be the opposite. You will write a public statement admitting that you stole my identity and defrauded me, and you will post it on the same page where you called me toxic. What Evan gasped. Mum, I can't do that. It would humiliate us. Kendra would leave me. That is the price. Evan, I said. You took my name. Now I am taking it back. But why? He sobbed. Why are you doing this? Is this revenge? I gripped the phone. My knuckles white. No. I said, I am not demanding revenge. I am demanding the truth. The mediation room at the courthouse was small and smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Evan sat across from me, his shoulders slumped, looking like a man who had not slept in a week. Kendra sat beside him, stiff as a mannequin. She was not looking at her husband or at the pile of incriminating documents on the table. Her eyes were darting down to her phone, hidden in her lap. She was checking her social media feed, terrified of the public court of opinion more than the actual court of law. Evan's lawyer, a weary man who realized 5 minutes in that he was fighting a losing battle, pushed the settlement agreement across the table. He did not argue. He did not bluster. He had seen the biometric analysis and the forged signatures. He knew they had no defense. My clients agree to the terms, the lawyer said, his voice flat. Full restitution of the $42,000, plus legal fees and credit repair costs. They understand that any missed payment will result in the immediate filing of criminal charges. I watched Evan pick up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He signed his name, cementing his financial ruin to save his freedom. But there was one more clause, the one I had insisted upon, the public statement. Graham Pike said, tapping the final page. It needs to be posted now. Before we leave this room. Evan looked up, his face pale and sweaty. Mum, do I really have to? It will destroy my business. It will ruin everything. You destroyed your business when you built it on stolen money. I said, post it. With trembling fingers, Evan typed the words we had agreed upon. He admitted to the financial abuse. He admitted to using my identity. He admitted that his accusations against me were lies designed to cover his tracks. He hit post. The reaction was almost instant. I watched Kendra's face curdle as the notifications started rolling in. The friends who had supported them, the neighbors who had looked at me with pity, suddenly went silent or turned on them. The facade of the perfect, successful couple crumbled in real time. Then came the final blow for Kendra. During the discovery phase, my lawyer had unearthed one last invoice. It was for the custom leather armchairs. Kendra had claimed she knew nothing about the fraud, that Evan had done it all behind her back. But there, On the delivery receipt was her signature, and the payment method was the credit card opened in my name. Graham slid the paper toward her. Mrs. Hart, Graham said. This is your signature accepting goods paid for with stolen funds. You are not a bystander. You are an accomplice. Kendra turned on Evan, her voice rising to a screech. You said you handled it. You said she would never know. You told me it was safe. I tried. Evan stammered. I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor silenced them both. I looked at Kendra, stripped of her arrogance, and then at Evan, stripped of his pride. I can still pay my own bills, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a cold wind. Just like I always have. But from now on, you will pay your own bills. I turned to leave. Evan scrambled up, reaching for my arm but stopping short of touching me. Mom. Wait, he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. Can we start over? I will make it up to you. I am sorry. I learned my lesson. I looked at him. I did not feel anger anymore. I did not feel sadness. I just felt a heavy, final resolve. The lesson was not for you to learn. Evan, I said, the lesson was for me. I learned that I am strong enough to stand alone. But we are family. He cried. No, I said. We are litigants, and we are finished. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, crisp afternoon air. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs. I did not have $40,000 in my pocket yet, but I had something far more valuable. I had my name back. I had my dignity. I walked to my car, unlocked the door, and drove away, leaving them behind in the shadow of the building. The lesson was not to hurt them. It was to ensure they never dared to underestimate me again. Thanks for listening to my story. Drop a comment below telling me where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear from you. And please, do not forget to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share these stories with even more people.